listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
All right, how's it going? And welcome along to a brand new Straight to Video podcast. I just found out maybe yesterday that this show is now officially 1 year old. We hit the landmark of 100 episodes a couple of weeks ago, but this week is kind of our official birthday from when it launched back in July 2020, so happy birthday to us. On today's show, I chat to UK singer-songwriter Mitchel Emms. Some of you may remember Mitchel from his appearance on Season 2 of the BBC TV show The Voice, where he went all the way through to the quarterfinals, and rightly so. Mitchel was more than just the rock guy on the show. His vocal talents, even back then, which is getting on for 10 years ago, were through the roof from his first blind audition, taking the Foo Fighters song Best of You and totally making it his own and going through to the next round in style. What some of you may not know is that while still only a teenager at that time, Mitchel was already something of a music veteran with close to 10 years of singing and performing already under his belt. It was really great to get the opportunity to hook up with Mitchel, as we're from similar areas in the country and have endless mutual friends, but never actually got the chance to speak, so it's always cool when that opportunity arises. Mitchel shares stories of his very first steps into the spotlight and TV world long before The Voice came along, as well as the aftermath of being on such a huge TV show and where an artist turns next. He shares his experiences with the band The Treatment, who he joined as lead vocalist, and also his recent and quite stunning solo album Vertigo at History's Edge, which he released at the end of 2019 and is available on all streaming platforms. Before we speak to Mitchel, if you enjoy listening to this show on a regular basis, please, if you can, consider checking out the Straight to Video Patreon page, where you will become an integral part of the growth of this show. Patreon allows you to sign up and send small monthly donations starting at just £2 a month, and in return you get a whole range of cool stuff from exclusive behind-the-scenes access, early news on guests, a bonus podcast, and even some Straight to Video merchandise which will not be available to anyone else. All the info can be found at patreon.com/STVpod, and thank you to everyone who has already become a much appreciated supporter. Also, if real rock and roll coffee is your thing, then check out our friends Dead Skull Coffee, who are a great independent UK coffee company with a rich background in the rock music world, and they're serving up listeners to this show a great 15% discount by simply adding the promo code STV on checkout over at deadskullcoffee.co.uk, so please drop by and pay them a visit. Okay, let's get into my chat with Mitchel Emms. If you want to reach out to Mitchel following our chat, he's easy to track down on all the social media platforms, from Mitchel Emms Official on Facebook and at Mitchel Emms on both Twitter and Instagram. That's Mitchel with a single L and Emms spelled E-M-M-S. And please take a listen to his album Vertigo at History's Edge, which is out now. So without further ado, let's hear my straight to video talk with Mitchel Emms. Your musical journey starts at like a crazy young age compared to a lot of us who perhaps become obsessed with bands and music in our teens, but you were way before then. So can you take us back to when you were a young boy growing up in, you say it was Burntwood, Staffordshire?
I was born in Walsall originally. We moved to a little town called Brownells for a couple of years, and then when I was about 7, 8, we moved to Burntwood. And I really didn't have much interest in music growing up. Up until about sort of like 8, 9 years old. I think the only things I was aware of was just stuff on the radio. I happened to really like Living the Loca by Ricky Martin when I was a kid. I loved that when I was a kid. But no, there was a time when my uncle briefly moved in for a couple of weeks. He was a bass player and he brought along all his instruments. And I was like, what the hell is that? That looks awesome. You know, an instant attraction to bass guitar and eventually guitar. In the space of just about a month or two, I was just became obsessed with picking up the guitar and finding out little weird things I could do with it and just learning it myself. My dad knew like a chord or two and we had like an old 12 string in the loft, but it wasn't really until then that I kind of started getting really interested in instruments. And that kind of led to me rummaging through my parents' CD collection. Because I got three older brothers, and at the time, like they would always be watching stuff like, you know, MTV or Kerrang would be on, or, you know, I think Scuzz, I don't know if you remember, that was one of the channels as well. There was just a lot of new metal. I remember them getting Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory. There was a lot of that sort of stuff I was exposed to. It just seemed like a lot really happened in that short space of time. So I discovered, watching TV, I discovered Nirvana, which was Heart Shaped Box, the music video come on, and I was like, what is this? And I just took to that instantly. And all of a sudden I was Nirvana obsessed and grunge obsessed.
Well, that's like some big Technicolor video when you see that one. I remember that one coming out. It's such a contrast to the other stuff as well, which was like dark and gloomy.
So I saw that and I was like, yeah, there's something about that is what I want to do. I don't know, just something in me wanted to do that.
And what year would that be, mate?
2002, 2003, around that time. But yeah, there was a lot of other things like that was going on. I was starting to discover my parents' CD collection. I was Pink Floyd's The Wall was one I absolutely loved. Then in around 2004, I think, I went to see my first proper gig, which was Rush at the NEC, one of my parents' favourite bands. And I knew nothing of them. And I only knew Grace Under Pressure, which was the one CD that we had in the house, which has become one of my favourite Rush records. But I remember seeing that, and that absolutely blew my mind. And just all in that small amount of time, I was just in music. That was just all I wanted to do. Eventually got an acoustic, and I got my first Stratocaster, which is this cheap Squire that I've still got in this room. I started learning stuff like, you know, Nirvana stuff, discovered the Beatles, started learning Beatles stuff on acoustic, learning open tunings and things.
As you do when you're like 7 or 8, 9 years old.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's weird when I look back on it now as an adult, because, you know, you grow up and you get an idea of how everybody else lives and your relationship to the rest of the world and who you are and whatnot. And yeah, it seems bizarre to me that it was very natural for me to get into music. Just seemed really intuitive. The other thing that happened around that time was I was at primary school, and this is one of those Christian primary schools where you sing a hymn every morning. I remember we were learning one, and a music teacher was asking everybody to sing. And so I had to go at singing, and she was like, wow, you can sing. Not only was I picking up guitar really quickly, but this was when I discovered that I had perfect pitch as well. But it was always a really intuitive thing, and I didn't really understand it till I was a lot older. What I was doing, it just seemed to everything just fit into place, really. So
how did the whole perfect pitch thing come about?
The only way I can ever really explain it is just my brain seems to make sense of vibrations and seems to know how that works in correlation to my limited musical theory knowledge.
So does like harmonies and things like that, do they come pretty easily to you?
Yeah, it comes pretty easily, really. It's just like, you know, when it's almost like there's a dissonance when you're out of tune with something and you're just very aware of that all the time, and you know what it feels like to be in harmony with something. So that's just the way I kind of grew up thinking about it. It was just like, oh, that doesn't vibrate right. Get it till it vibrates right. I don't know. I still really can't explain it. I've had some basic music theory that I've kind of picked up along the way, but it's just always been this strange thing that I can do.
Do you feel confident in that? Because a lot of musicians, me in particular, feel like a bit of an imposter, like I'm going to get caught out because I don't know any kind of musical theory. I'm self-taught pretty much on the bass, and I learn stuff by ear. Well, unless I go on YouTube and learn off like a 12-year-old kid playing the bass cover. I sometimes do that. But generally I can figure stuff out by my ear, but I'm still waiting to get busted. Do you ever have that?
No, I totally get that. I mean, it's I feel like I've had a bit of that all my life, really. There is a sense of like you haven't earned it in some way. You don't really know exactly what you're doing. Like I never learned to read tab. I never really learned to read music. Everything has just been playing the instruments themselves and singing a lot and just figuring it out. And I remember I was briefly in university for a bit, and then I dropped out. I was doing a music course, and I got introduced to this concept of the circle of fifths. And I was like, oh, right, this is what people have to do. I felt, I finally understood.
Was you already putting that into practice anyway, but just didn't realise what it was?
Well, I didn't really realise what it was. I just kind of just made stuff up as I went along, really. So, you'd be going, oh, this is a diminished chord. And you're like, oh, that's what that's called. I mean, a lot of the time it's like my frame of reference was just listening to music. You listen to stuff. And when I was learning guitar, because I was getting a really good idea of what all the notes were on the fretboard and what they all sounded like, all I had to do was just listen to the music itself and go, he's playing that note and I know where that note is on the fretboard. So you just kind of learn by ear, and that's kind of what all I ever did, really.
Was you getting into music so heavily at such a young age? Was you kind of a bit of a loner at school, or was people into all kind of different things and you're like, well, I'm into Nirvana from the 90s?
I think, yeah. I mean, for me, when I was growing up, I'm the youngest of three older brothers, so I wasn't growing up alone or anything, but at school, I definitely didn't always fit in. And I think the second I even had, an inch of long hair, like that was it. I was just singled out all the time. In a way, that kind of pushed me towards sort of more angrier, angsty music that seemed to speak to me on some level. That's why I, loved bands like Nirvana. I did like a lot of the sort of new metal stuff that was going on when I was growing up. All of that stuff really spoke to me. And then obviously discovering bands like Pink Floyd as well. Radiohead was a big one for me. I remember given a copy of OK Computer by Radiohead, and I was just like, never heard anything like this before. This is awesome,
You went in straight away then? You didn't go in via the bends or anything like that? You went straight in with OK Computer?
No, it's the same with like Pink Floyd. I went straight in with The Wall, It's like, it wasn't until I was about 13, 14 that I actually got around to listening to like Dark Side of the Moon or anything. So I just started with something like The Wall, which was like, I didn't even know what this band looked like. You know what I mean? I had zero clue. It was like this huge movie in my head when I was, listening to it. I was like, why are there so many different singers? Who is that guy? Who's this guy? Who's doing all these parts? A bit of the sort of old school way of, so I wasn't exactly going out my way to go on the family computer and type in members of Pink Floyd. I was a bit too young for that at the time. Yeah, it was sort of magical in a sense.
Well, the opportunity came up to be part of, which I think's nuts, the kids' version of Stars in Their Eyes at 10 years old, where you did a superb version of Kurt Cobain. How easy was it for you to kind of familiarise yourself with like Nirvana's career and legacy?
Pretty easy. Once I got obsessed with it, I wanted to know everything about them. Try to search as much stuff online as possible as I could at the time. I just tried to listen to all their stuff. So I was already pretty familiar with it. And then I had an opportunity to audition for this thing called the Stars in Their Eyes Roadshow. Yeah, I was about 9 when that happened. I was like, yeah, I'll do some Nirvana songs. I love that stuff. And the whole thing was supposed to be like a live show, and like whoever won was voted most on that live show would get put on a TV show. Instead, the whole thing just went, they just couldn't get any funding for it and they cancelled it. But they gave everyone who took part an opportunity to audition for Stars in Their Eyes Kids. So me and my parents my dad mainly was just like, yeah, give it a go. Why not? We just went and did it, and then I ended up on it. And yeah, it came very naturally to me. It was, but it was, definitely a strange experience for a 10-year-old to have, I think.
I've got to ask, whose decision was it for you to play left-handed on the show?
The producers, they were like, well, one, you can't play it live because that's an unfair advantage to other contestants. And because you're portraying someone else, you need to do it properly. So they handmade this sort of Jag-stang left-handed copy. I kind of figured out how to mimic the chords. It Smells Like Teen Spirit chords are kind of like, they're just bar chords. And you could do the same with like an F chord and just kind of go up and down the neck with an F chord left-handed, because my hand just naturally shapes into a F chord when I'm playing left-handed, as I'm not left-handed, but that's just the way my hand goes. So I just went, oh, that'll look right. At least it looks right.
I love you were thinking of that at like 9 or 10 years old. It's got to look right.
I don't know, it's just that's the way I thought about it, really. It was I just wanted to make it look authentic. I didn't just want to do that,
When was the last time you watched that?
It's been a while.
Is it something the family pull out at parties?
A lot of the time, yeah. It has been used for that purpose many times. It's like, I think for a while I was embarrassed about it for some reason. And then you get older and then you kind of go, well, that's actually pretty mad for a 10-year-old to do.
Mate, at least you aren't doing Ricky Martin, Living La Vida Loca. That could have happened.
Yeah, that could have been the alternative. Had I not discovered alternative music and guitars, it might have happened. Who knows?
Was that one of your first times actually being on a stage, though?
It wasn't the first time I'd been on stage. My aunt was a kind of like, she was a pub singer, did like workmen's clubs, doing covers and stuff. She turned up PA, backing tracks, to do 2 hours of everything, really. So I got kind of like introduced to that quite early, just, playing in pubs and clubs. And I'd have the opportunity, she let me get up with my own backing tracks that I was making at the time, with a little BR8 8-track recorder with like zip discs and stuff and a drum machine, doing covers of my own songs that I was writing. And I'd do like a 30-minute set of just this alternative grunge rock in the middle of a pub.
That's insane. At that kind of age, like pre-teen?
Yes, that was before Stars and Rise, yeah.
Wow.
And that was where I really started to learn how to perform live, really. So I'd already done that a few times before the Stars and Ice thing. After the Stars and Ice experience, it was kind of like, I think I remember on the drive back with my dad, who was just kind of like saying, that's the past going behind you. This is where you're going now. I'm sure this is what you want to do with your life, because, if you're going to do music, you're going to want to make a proper go of it. You're going to have to be quite dedicated at it. And you realize that it's going to put you on a different path, in life. Do you understand that? And I'm like 10 years old going, yeah, let's do it. That's what I want to do. After that really kick-started almost every weekend at this point. I was out gigging and playing and just learning how to be a live performer and learning how to sing all sorts of different songs. And by the time I was 15, I'd done about 500 of those, of just gigs in pubs.
Just the solo kind of stuff?
Just with my aunt.
Because that's got to be pretty hard. You ain't going to find many other musicians who are going to want to form a band.
Well, yeah, at that time, it was a sort of strange environment for me to learn in, but it wasn't until I was about 15 that I was really like, I want to get into a band, and do this properly. I don't want to be playing covers in pubs to backing tracks. But I'd already learned through doing that how to do long shows and stuff when I was 12. My dad was also helping out with PA and lights and stuff. I actually started to do my own 2-hour shows as a kid. And I remember the first one I did was Halloween at this haunted place called the Four Crosses in Cannock. Was the first solo 2-hour show gig that I did at the age of 12.
It's all right figuring having 2 hours worth of material, but what did you do in between the songs? Did you have the confidence to say anything?
It was kind of just thank you, this next song is such and such, and you just kick into it. It was where I learned how to perform, really, and just kind of learned how to sing. And back then, though, I was pushing my voice really hard. I don't know how I did it particularly.
There is some footage of you on stage, I think, where you're about 15 years old, where you've got the full-on long hair and everything. You're proper throwing the shapes and the whole thing. It's not your first time doing it. It's great.
Well, no, and I think as well, at that time, I was very much fearless. I think at that time, because I was a very different person at school, and then after school, I'm this other person that goes and does a gig and everybody wants to talk to you at the end of the night and is applauding, and you go back to school and you get called a girl for having long hair and in fights and all that lovely stuff.
Was anybody at school aware of that, of what you was doing?
A few people were, yeah, but they didn't really take it seriously or anything, so it was just kind of like, oh, who's this weirdo who wants to be a rock star kind of thing. That was the sort of environment it was at school. I just think, there was definitely I was in a bit of a bubble of my own, really. I didn't really have any fear outside of school. The stage really was, and still is in many ways, it's probably the most comfortable place for me to be. It's I don't ever really overthink too much about myself when I'm on stage, and that was very much the case back then, of just going, I want to put on a good show and I want to enjoy doing it. Weird times, but they were very extraordinary in that sense. But you don't realise at the time, because it seems so normal to me, that you don't realise that it's extraordinary in a sense, that it's not the norm. Definitely
not, man. Definitely not. So was the band Toxic Federation your first opportunity to be in a real band environment?
Yeah, it was the first time for me to be with a professional band, that's for sure. I tried putting together bands with other people and stuff prior to that, and it just didn't really work. Everyone was still kind of young and stuff. So Toxic was really the first band where it's we've got dates. We're doing this proper. I joined them. They'd already had an album stuff written. So I came in and at 15 just put my voice to all the stuff they had written at the time. And looking back, because these were all guys that were all a little bit older than me. I was 15, the majority of the band members were 18. So it was a lot of the lyrics and stuff that were being written at the time didn't fully grasp until I was a lot older, and then I was kind of like, oh, I see what they're talking about now. But what I was trying to do is just be my first time really tackling someone else's stuff in a sort of creative sense, like someone else's original material. So all I wanted to do is just add drama to it and just add a sense of performance to it. And it was like first time playing original music in places like Wolford Hall, playing like little festivals and things, and being with professional, musicians.
It was kind of a weird time to be in a band from what I remember, as things seem to be quite fragmented with like local scenes and all that kind of stuff. Was it easy for you guys to find a foothold?
The way I remember it is because I started out in the pubs and clubs in like the early mid-2000s as a kid. It's like I kind of watched it as that sense of the atmosphere was changing. And I think, little things like, obviously I don't think we should all be stuffed in a room inhaling cigarette smoke. I don't think it's good for anybody. But, at that time, the smoking ban seemed to put a lot of people off going out and being in pubs and environments like that, and just things getting more expensive. And I just kind of started to notice that sense of community and the sense of that same atmosphere was sort of starting to go away at this point when I started joining bands. Obviously, we just had like the recession had just started hitting at that time. So yeah, it was definitely a weird time because it just felt very much like a transitional period that something was happening. So
2013 comes around and you've been embracing YouTube and posting covers of more mainstream pop rock kind of stuff on your YouTube channel. Was it these that caught the eye of the scouts of The Voice? Because if I'm right, you didn't actually apply yourself, did you? Did they find you?
Sort of like that. An acoustic video cover that I put up had been sent off to someone else who then had put it in as an industry recommendation for The Voice. So when that came around and I got that email saying, hi, I would like to invite you to do this, I was like, why not? Because I think for me as well, like my sense of what I wanted to do musically was changing. When I look back at myself at 18, 19, I was still very much trying to figure myself out in what I wanted to be. I'd been the like rock frontman thing, but I felt that like there was another part that I was completely missing out on, and there was other sensibilities that I enjoyed. I mean, in an ideal world, which is kind of what I'm trying to do now in a way, is just I want to combine all of it together, really. So it's its own thing. But at that time, I was just trying new things out, really. So like doing the acoustic covers was just a kind of, again, a why not thing. And I never would have expected that would have led to being asked to do something like The Voice. But at that time as well, it was like you were talking about how the scene was, things are sort of fragmented. And it just felt like this is absolutely impossible to try and be in a band without having some major support behind you, and a real push in terms of like media or whatnot. So going on TV would be like, sort of like, well, this is a last resort. Let's give this a go. Try and get some exposure from it. That was the way I looked at it at the time. I never expected to get on it. So what happened after that was pretty unexpected. I was like, okay.
Who could you actually tell about it? Because it's shot so far in advance. Was you still in Toxic Federation when the option came up?
I'd left Toxic in about 2011. So the end of 2011, you can't believe that's 10 years ago. Jeez. But I was just kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. I took part in some other stuff and some other bands and things, but I was also making my own music, putting together my first ever album. And I was starting university and just trying to get a grip on what it is that I wanted to do. And then The Voice just kind of came slap bang into that. And I was like, okay, now this is what I'm doing for the next few months. The people nearest to me definitely knew about it. It was a couple of months in advance. Like, we'd done a lot of the rounds by like February and the show didn't air till like April. So there was a lot of time to kind of keep hush about it.
I see a lot of times on shows like The Voice or any talent show that features, let's say, the rock person, the social media crowd who are rock fans, they'll get behind them whether they're good or not, which is fine. But to me, that's almost like having your mates or family supporting you regardless. And
yeah.
If you don't get through, they're like, oh, you was robbed. Not for the fact that you weren't that good or other people were better. But I got to say, you were legit on that show, mate. Even watching it back now, your voice kills on that Foo Fighters song. And you add your own slant on it with like some of the melody lines and stuff. So kudos for that, mate. Nailed it.
I mean, as a singer, I've never really gone out of my way after I'd had my sort of, few years of Nirvana fandom and realised I couldn't keep singing like that because it's bad for my voice. There was a lot of singers that I grew up listening to that I really enjoyed, and a lot of them were rock singers, but I also enjoyed a lot of other singers that aren't traditionally good singers. It's like they just have a lot of character and emotion, and and drama in their voices, So it's like I never really went out of my way to sound specifically like anybody else. I just wanted to combine the things that I liked with the sort of sense of passion that I have in myself. And I feel that sort of lends itself a little bit to kind of rock vocals, because you want your voice to soar almost. You want it to have that release, that moment, and not just be whispering or, hush to yourself. Because I don't think that's sometimes does justice to the emotions that people feel and that you feel, and the emotions that you can express in music, So it's like I always enjoyed that aspect of it, but people tend to sort of classify that as a rock voice. So going to the show, it's very much I've got long hair and I'm doing a rock track. I'm the rock guy, I remember watching it back and they're like, the bit where you finished your audition and I hear the opening notes to Paradise City by Guns N' Roses. And I'm like, so yeah, that was really funny. But it's like, I really was more inspired by alternative music in general. And I think at that time I was a bit afraid of being seen as just a rock guy, because I just felt like I'm so many other things in this, and I don't want to be pigeonholed. So it was like I did try to just put my own slant on it wherever I could. I remember this as the second round you're going to do Are You Going to Be My Girl by Jet? And I'm just like, okay, or we'll do that, So the round after that, I was like, I had an opportunity to pick the song and do something really interesting with the song. So we did like a kind of punk rock version of a country song by Lady Antebellum.
Mm-hmm. Great tune, man, that one is.
I just thought it was a great song, and I thought I could do something really interesting with this, because I still want that energy. I still want the kind of rock energy thing. I don't want it to be boring, but I don't want it to just be one thing. I was glad that I had that opportunity to do that. When it came to like the quarterfinals, it was like I had a really different idea in mind. I wanted to do something completely different. One of the songs that I wanted to do and I was originally going to do was Bed Shaped by Keane. I just wanted to do a big epic thing that was very different from the run around, swishing your hair around rock thing. I wanted to show a bit more of myself. But last minute they were like, oh, there's this band and they're going to be massive in a month's time, and that'll coincide with what you're doing, so why don't you do one of their songs? It's called Radioactive by this new band called Imagine Dragons. And so that was the way it went. That was the last one I did on the show. And again, I got to have a bit of fun with that one.
It is falling into a slightly different category. It's not your obvious choice. I don't know if that's linked to record sales.
No, I mean, all I heard was, well, we know industry insiders and we know this is going to be up there around the time of the live shows. So I was like, okay, I'll trust what you're saying. No, but it was fun to do. It was still a fun track to do. I just tried to put as much of myself into it, really, just do a big show of it.
Did you get time to interact with many of the, let's say, the judges on the show?
It wouldn't be a surprise to say that, a lot of it is staged. You kind of have a certain amount of time. With Danny, I did have a bit of time to spend with him, in the sense that he invited me to be backstage with the script for a couple of their arena shows. So I got to be backstage at the O2 Arena, share a cigarette with Danny and just kind of chat with him about stuff. There's a little bit of chatter in between and some really nice experiences, but on the whole, it was very much like, this is for the cameras,
Yeah, fair enough. Where do you go after something like that? Like, what's the following week or month look like after being on primetime TV pretty much every week?
I'd gone into it quite cynically, I think, at the time, thinking, I'm just going to do the show. I don't expect anything from this, But as it went on, it was like, oh, I think I could really do this. You'd gone from like just kind of doing this in secrecy almost to then people knowing about you. And I remember the night the audition happened, and it was like my phone was just going vroom, 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 for like an hour, just because I was just getting tons of followers on like Twitter and Facebook and stuff, just all blowing up.
And this is almost 10 years ago. Imagine what it'd be like now.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there was a story from someone else on the show that their phone blew up because of that.
Just melted.
Battery melted, just because the phone was just constantly vibrating. Yeah, that was a pretty surreal experience. And on the whole, it was very surreal. And, you're walking around London and you're getting recognised. Remember one of the funny times I was walking around London, some dude in a really expensive car just pulls up and he says, man, I loved you on the show. Absolutely loved you. And he just drove off. And I was like, all right, fair enough. And then he comes back. I don't know how. It was like, that's a really expensive car. He drives back and he just chucks 3 bags of weed at us and just says, a present on me, and then just drives off. I was like, okay. So there's a lot of weird things like that happening and just getting recognised and stuff, but really coming off the show for me was like, it was quite emotional because you realise that that whole experience was over now, and that you're kind of just waiting for somebody to get in touch with you at this point. You're thinking everyone's built you up to this point. It's like you're going to get signed. Surely someone's going to do something with you, and it was nothing. It was just absolutely nothing. So at that point, I just took it into my own hands and went, well. At that time, I really still wanted to be in a band and I still wanted to do my own thing. So with this album that I'd put together, which I'd recorded myself, wrote myself, I just started putting it online and I put a band around it and we started playing gigs, really. So,
and that was Mr. Nothing?
Yeah, that was Mr. Nothing. So we did that for a good year or two. Those were some really fun times, for me. In a strange way, you've gone from doing something very mainstream or to suddenly trashing your guitar around on stage and screaming at people and being angsty again. Whether that was a good idea or not, retrospectively, I don't know, but that was what I wanted to do. I was learning how to write new stuff. I was learning how to manage a band and finding myself creatively, So I did that for a while, but there was obviously that sort of sense of disappointment because you expected so much more from the show. It's not like there'd been multiple seasons of it where you could kind of get an idea of how people do after the show. It was only been one season at that point. So the second season, it was like, you don't really know how it's going to turn out. So for me, it was like, it felt like starting from scratch again, really, after the show. Yeah, again, finding myself, trying to find what kind of direction creatively I wanted to go.
Were things kind of any easier for you from like getting any traction for the new band with social media or anything?
I think so, a little bit, yeah. I mean, the fact that there were people there to be able to hear the stuff that I'd been making online, that was really, really cool. So it wasn't just like releasing stuff to dead ears. So there were a lot of people who still listen to that stuff now. So that was good. And we were able to get certain gigs. I was able to get some sort of radio stuff as well.
You could at least get in the door.
You could, yeah, a little bit. But not really much further than that, really. We still had to sort of prove ourselves and prove our chops as a band, and with the music that we were writing. But I was starting to get influenced by a lot more other things at that point, and I think the music started to take a bit of a darker turn as well. It started to be a lot more punky and kind of aggressive, in certain ways, and a bit more experimental before the band ended. But they were really fun times, and some of my favourite memories of playing in a band actually was with that band, just because those small shows can be quite magical, really, compared to the bigger ones, They can be a lot of fun, and the people that you're with, they're good memories, definitely.
And you took on another new journey in 2015, I think, when you were asked to join The Treatment. Was that exciting for you, joining a band who were regularly touring? And, I mean, they got some crazy exposure.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was like, I'd been doing this Mr. Nothing band, and in a way, it was very much my band, and it was very much my vehicle for my ideas and music. I was getting to the point where I was starting to get kind of a bit burned out with it. I think in a space of a year, we went through like 3 drummers. Our bass player didn't know whether he was staying or going, and it's like, and just things were not picking up. We was taking forever in the studio to get stuff done when we really could have released so much more music had we just done it at home, but we were trying to do it properly. This stuff was just taking forever. The demos that I was making and just kind of getting the band to put their own spin on, I enjoyed that process, but it was just taking so long, and it just felt like all the pressure was on me to make it all happen, and I didn't really feel like anybody was, at that time, that's just the way I felt at the time, is I didn't feel anyone was fighting my corner. What I needed to hear at that point was somebody to kind of tell me to believe in the art that I was making, and I didn't really have that. So I started to kind of like go, well, I don't think people want this. People don't want this weird stuff I make. So I was like, I'm going to take a break for a little bit from the band. In that time, I had a message from Dan, the drummer of The Treatment, saying they were looking for a singer to fill in some shows because their singer couldn't do a tour or something. So I was like, okay, sure. I'd love to kind of do a tour. I'd never really done that kind of stuff properly, Done festivals, done TV, done everything, but I'd never done like a tour or international touring all that much. So like that seemed quite exciting to me to go and do that. And I went down to audition for them, and they were pretty much like, well, actually, we don't just want you to fill in. We actually want you to be the new singer. So it was a bit of a sort of crisis in myself, I suppose, of kind of going, do I continue doing my own stuff that nobody's paying attention to, or do I try and do the rock singer thing again and just enjoy the experience and just see where that goes, really? So I chose that and began that whole journey.
How was that whole transition? Did you enjoy being plugged into that machine, which they had?
I have very sort of mixed feelings about The Treatment and my experience with it. I think a part of it always has to do with when you join someone else's situation. I think that's always can be a difficult experience because you're taking on someone else's creative vision, someone else's idea of what they want to do. So very much I was told to be a certain way, to dress a certain way, to sing a certain way, with these songs that they had written for this next album. So I gave it my best shot and I gave it a good go. And yeah, it was kind of like I learned a lot. I learned a lot about touring. I learned a lot about professionalism just in general. I learned a lot about myself through that experience. But this was a time when I was very much at that time, 21, 22, 23, I was starting to just really, very much, I was still discovering myself because I'd been constantly doing stuff my whole life.
I was going to say, most of us are only just getting off the starting blocks at 20 or 21. You've already had this massive
Yeah,
amount.
I've already done 10 years of stuff non-stop, but I'd been my whole childhood and teenage years and this. So I never really had any time to just kind of go, is this really what I want to do? And how am I going to go about doing it? More of the sort of stuff going on in my head was existential questions at this point. My relation to reality in the world around what am I doing? What does this represent to people? Do I feel like I'm doing something that is creatively good? And a lot of those kind of questions, I was really quite troubled, I think, during that whole time. And you're spending that time doing stuff that you've never done before with people that you'd never met before, very different people. There are people with a very different outlook on things and very different taste in things. So it was quite at times it was very fun, but other times it was quite a lonely experience for me. You got no money to your name, you're skint, and you're in the back of a tour van in the middle of Europe somewhere, And it's it definitely opens your eyes to a lot of different realizations, I suppose.
It's just the realities of it, isn't it? From the outside, it looks great, but then some of the intricacies of it.
I mean, this was some of the hardest stuff I'd ever had to sing in my life because the stuff was written for that right at the top of your range, And for me, it wasn't that I was a bad singer, although I definitely kind of felt like one because a lot of it was a struggle because the way I sing, I don't put on a voice to hit those high notes. I feel like a lot of high note singer, rock singer types do. I always feel like they're putting on a sort of voice to kind of get those high notes out, whereas I'm pushing it, I'm going for it. That's my voice. I'm not, putting on a voice to sound higher. That is me actually pushing it into those notes. So, my head was just stuck in a steamer 24/7 doing that, warm-ups and stuff. And I think at that time as well, I did want to party. I did want to enjoy myself. And there was just really none of that. There was a sense of you are not allowed to drink on the road. That was the rule for me, was that you were not allowed to drink.
You're not allowed to overdrink. You're just not allowed to drink.
Not allowed to drink, period. Not at all. I understand the fear because it's it takes time, it takes money, it takes commitment to make the whole tour happen. It would be unfair on the band if I lost my voice during halfway through a tour just because I was drinking loads. But at the same time, I really had no way of relaxing after these gigs. These were the hardest I'd ever performed, hardest I'd ever sang, pushing myself to limits, and I'm throwing myself in the audience every night, giving it 110%. And you just don't know how to relax after the show because you've gone and done that. The adrenaline's going, you've helped load out the gear, you've had this full workout. Then it's like, right, we're off in the van now, we're hitting the road. And you're sleeping in the van, a lot of the time, and you just can't sleep. You can't recover. And so a lot of the time I was getting ill just because of the stress. I was getting stressed out about the whole situation, but I was getting physically there wasn't very much opportunity for me to recover in that sense. So that was physically draining on me to do it. The combination of variables going on there. So yeah, it was a challenging time, that whole experience for me. And then again, you've got that thing in the back of your mind going, is this what I want to do? Can I do this? Is this really what I want to be pursuing? Although I was grateful for the experiences that I was getting to have. I mean, I think some of the last gigs I did with them were opening up for the Scorpions in France at an arena, playing Hellfest main stage. These were, and then at that point I knew that I was leaving the band and stuff as well. So it was just these were insane experiences, to be having. But at the same time, it's I realized that, or at least I was starting to realize that I needed to do something different. Or I needed to figure out what it is that I wanted to do. And that was just eating away at my mental health the whole time. You just start to feel alienated. You just start to feel less of yourself, and less confident about yourself. And, it really grinds you down. So it took me a really long time after leave the band to really sort of build my confidence back up again, And
after you left the band, how long did it take for you to kind of get that buzz back?
I never stopped writing music. So that's something I've always done. Music's always been an outlet for me. That's something I've done the whole time. I've got albums of stuff that I'll never release, but I've just been making over the years.
You're like Prince, dude. He's got albums in the vaults.
Sort of, it's almost like a personal journal, you know. It's like I've got recordings of how I felt at that time, what kind of person I was at that time. You know, so I was doing that anyway, because that's I think my biggest passion is creating music. That's what I really, really gravitate towards first and foremost, you know. So I've been doing all that and I still continue to do that. But really, it was like in terms of putting another or joining another originals kind of thing, you know, that was just off the table for a really long time. It's just like I needed to just be normal for a bit. I started doing other things and started getting work like in the corporate world and working with like session musicians and stuff, which was nice because I had no money when I was with the treatment. I wasn't getting paid or anything. So it was like I was broke practically, you know. So you got 100 quid to make last for the next few weeks, you know, until you can get another little acoustic gig. So that's what I was doing at the time. I was playing little acoustic gigs around Cambridge, like midnight. All right, you're on until midnight till 2 in the morning, you know. Just living out my suitcase, really. And all my money was just either going on food or travel, you know. So I started doing corporate stuff, and that led to me actually being able to earn money, which was great, getting good gear and getting back into guitar again, because that's something I hadn't been doing on stage since like 2014. So learning to become a guitarist again and finding my voice as a guitar player as well, something that I'd really missed. And that was really cool getting back into that. It's kind of like you just start back at where you go back to the building blocks of why you do what you do. And that's the thing that I think I lost a bit of sight of. You go through your life kind of chasing success and chasing this thing, and you have to sort of remember that that isn't necessarily the reason that you're doing it. You want people to discover what you're doing, but it's like it has to come down to what you're actually doing. That's the most important thing, you know. And for a while I wasn't happy with what I was doing. I didn't feel that was for me, you know, what I was doing, and it wasn't me. So just sort of getting back in touch with myself in that sense and kind of going, right, what is it that I want to do?
Well, you put out the album in 2019, Vertigo at History's Edge, which is something to be really proud of, mate. It's some great songs on there, and it does just feel extremely honest. Where was you pulling the influences musically for that? Because there's lots of different things going off.
Well, there's a lot really going on with that one, in the sense that I think sometimes people say you have 10 years to write your first album, and then you have like 10 days to write the second, sort of thing. And that's the way I look at Vertigo. That is really the culmination of a lot of many years of writing and discovering what kind of music that I want to make. Predominantly, there was a lot of prog rock sort of influences. The big one that I was a big influence on that was actually an album I'd never heard before, and it was this album by an artist called Stephen Wilson called Hand Cannot Erase. And that record just hit me at the right moment and just went, that's what I've been trying to do. Something like this is what I've been trying to do, and someone's doing it. And I was really annoyed discovering. I was like, someone's doing it. Someone's doing the thing that is kind of combining the prog stuff with the pop stuff, with the alternative stuff, with the electronic stuff, you know, with a little bit of like heavier moments sprinkled in, and it's very emotional, and it's like, that's what I want, something like that. And someone was doing it. So I was really pissed off. And then the obvious realization to have after that is the realization that, well, if he can do it, why can't I do it? That's almost an encouragement. This guy's doing it. The same thing as me, which is he's a multi-instrumentalist, writes his own stuff, puts his own stuff together, solo artist. So that really was inspiring for me to kind of go, I can do this. So I started releasing music. I was trying lots of different things out at the time, and stuff was kind of like, can sometimes take a year to just get the sound that you're looking for. You're just writing new stuff, but stuff isn't really feeling right. But I wrote this song called Rivers of Ice. Then I just went, that's it. I know where to go from here. So I started writing a lot more stuff after that. And then things took a bit of a different path with Vertigo when the start of 2019, a friend of mine passed away. It was quite shocking for me in the sense of he was really the last person I thought, well, not the last person, but it was just sort of like, it's just a shock, isn't it? You know, it comes out of nowhere that someone that you've spent time with, someone that you've had really interesting conversations with, someone who, when you look back on it, has had an effect on your life in quite a meaningful way. When someone like that, you get the news that they're gone, it just sparked open a whole thing in my head where I couldn't write about anything else. It was like, suddenly the album was this sort of commentary on, or like a sort of social commentary on suicide, really, and on stuff that felt very important to me at that time. So it went from something that was like, I really want to do this because this is the combination of all my favorite types of music and my love for production, as well, recording stuff and crafting a sound and an experience. It went from just that into like, I have to do this. There's something in me that just needs to make this, because it just feels like the most important thing for me to do. It's just kind of just put everything in perspective a little bit for me. So
is it all you on the album, or is anyone else playing on it?
No, nobody else. It was very much like, because I still wasn't earning a lot of money. So it was, my whole life I've just been learning how to do stuff myself. And that's not because I'm against collaborating with people. It's just a lot of the time I can't find those people, or it's like, it's quicker for me to just get the idea done. So I did myself, the lyrics, guitar parts, bass parts, synth parts, drum parts, mixing. I even mastered it myself. I did the best I could at the time. And I did all the artwork myself as well. Messing around with photo editing, really, and I've done band tour posters and stuff in the past. I did all the treatment ones when I was with them. When you've done everything, you kind of want to make sure that the visual aspect of it does kind of suit what you're trying to say.
Freaking hell, man. Awesome job on pulling all that together. Did the pandemic kind of halt chances of you pushing it as much as you wanted to do, like with touring, or will you pick things up when things get back to normal?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't release it with a record label. I literally released it independently just because I wanted it out there. I just wanted people to hear it. I'd come to a point where I was like, I don't care anymore if this isn't successful. What would make me happy is putting out art that's meaningful to me and hopefully meaningful to other people. That's where this is all kind of coming to now. I didn't have any support, no label, nothing. But then the pandemic hit, and it was just sort of like, shit. Pandemic was difficult, really, because it was like, it's the first time in my life that I'd really had a complete stop from performing live. Although I was doing my solo album, I was still doing loads of other stuff. I got asked to sing for Don Airy, Deep Purple's keyboard player. I was doing a lot of session stuff, doing a lot of corporate gigs. Last minute, I got asked to, says, hey, can you come on to Strictly Come Dancing, be one of the singers in the production band for a few shows? And I just kind of went, why not? Let's do it. My mum would love that. It just felt like a really mad time. I was really busy, performing a lot. I was making this very intense personal solo thing. And then everything stopped.
Breaks on entire world.
Yeah. So it's like, I didn't really know what to do with myself for a bit. I think looking back now, it was sort of like a good time for me to just be myself and just be me at home. Explore the things that I really enjoy that are outside of music, which, creative person, if you've got other hobbies, you've got stuff that you're into. Like, I'm a lover of cinema, and I love gaming, and I love lots of other stuff. My issue is I couldn't write about anything, because you're just experiencing the same day over and over again, the same week over and over again. There's, I don't mean to complain about this as a musician who's been stuck at home all this time, because there are plenty of people who've been in awful positions, or have carried on as business as usual, still working through the entire thing, So we've all had similar experiences, but also very different experiences. For me, it was just the monotony of not knowing when my industry was going to open up again, whether, when's the next time I can actually go and earn some money again, And it wasn't until the end of last year, Christmas 2020, that after kind of starting to put tiptoes back into writing new stuff, I come up with this new track, it just kind of sparked. Bang.
He's back.
I'm back. For the past 6 months now, it's been like, ever since that, I've been working on album number 2. I'm in the process now of starting to pull it together, starting to get mixes done, I've got the album art, and I've got a title for it. I've got everything starting to come together now. But also, I didn't want to make the same album again. It's something that I really want to stick by. I don't want to repeat myself too much. I want to challenge and I want to get better. Because after I did Vertigo, I really felt that I didn't know if I was going to be able to do another album again. That was such an emotional experience and something very personal. And it just felt like, how can I do that again? It's took me a while to really go, I can. I just need to keep doing different things. I just need to keep finding inspiration for things. And this, again, is turning out to be a very personal thing again. But I think it does have, I really struggle to describe it. The way I can describe it is it's almost like a science fiction dystopia, but it's like a modern day dystopia record. I say science fiction, but what I really mean is like we're currently in a science fiction kind of reality at the moment, the kind of technology that we have and what's going on in the world. So there's a bit of that going on, I feel. And especially because I'm using a lot more synths and I'm using more interesting guitar sounds and stuff now, it's like things are getting a bit more trippier, I think, in a way, a bit more cinematic.
The last one still seems fresh. I mean, this last year or so has just gone in a heartbeat. So don't put the last one to bed just yet. It might still have some legs.
Well, no, I'm not. I mean, what's really interesting, I mean, there's some stuff going on in the background that I can't really fully talk about at the moment, but it's really positive stuff. And a lot of that's based off of people discovering Vertigo now. We're like a year and a half after it's been released and going, this needs a proper release. This needs a label release, you know. So at the moment, it's very much fingers crossed. It's very much, you know, I'm just seeing where I'm going with it. But, you know, for me, the focus is on making the second one now.
Mitchell, I'm going to let you go, man. I've loved chatting with you, dude, and hearing your journey. You're still a young pup, and you've done all this stuff. It's crazy.
I'm trying to keep up. You just keep rolling with it, keep learning. So that's all you can do, really. No, thanks for having me on, man. I really, really appreciate it.
No, you've got a great story, man. You've got a great story, and be proud of everything that you've done, man. It's all part of the full picture.
Thank you.
Well, hopefully I'll get to say hey to you at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hope we'll be able to have a drink together in future or something in person. That'll be wicked.
A big thank you shout out to Mitchel Emms for sharing his amazing journey with me here on the Straight to Video podcast. Be sure to take a listen and pick up his stunning solo album Vertigo at History's Edge and connect with him on all social media channels. I, for one, am very much looking forward to what he does next. Also, please help support and grow this show in whatever way you can, from simply liking and sharing the show on social media, possibly giving us a review on Apple Podcasts, or if you can, take a look at the Patreon page over at patreon.com/STVpod to help support the show and really get behind the scenes. Whatever you do is massively appreciated. All earlier episodes can be listened to on your favourite podcast platform or by simply visiting stvpod.com, where you can also find some STV music and videos, along with a merch store where I've just added some trucker caps in time for the summer. So that's all for this episode. Thanks again to Mitchel Emms for chatting, and to all of you out there for listening, and I look forward to doing it all again soon.